May 10th, 1996, at the Copenhagen International Airport. A gang war is raging in, of all places, Scandinavia. Finland, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway are all seeing shootings and bombings, grenade attacks, rocket launchers aimed at clubhouses, things that these countries never really experienced at the time. Some say the war starts over a battle for territory and drug routes. Others, that it's more a matter of pride and honor after some bad blood incidents. Either way, it's a wild, violent scene. And it's about to get a whole lot wilder and a whole lot more violent. The two warring gangs are both decades-old international 1%er outlaw motorcycle clubs, originally started in the US and now dead set on expansion all over Europe. It's the infamous Hells Angels and their rivals, the Bandidos. On this particular day, a group of Bandidos members, including the Danish president, are returning from a trip to party with their affiliates in Helsinki, Finland, who just opened up a new clubhouse. Unfortunately, there's some Hells Angels who had separately been returning from a trip to a tattoo convention and tipped off their clubmates back home to be ready and waiting for the Bandidos. And that they are, in the parking lot of an international airport. A witness will later tell police that he saw 8 to 10 people emerge from a number of cars. They walk over to a parked car and unload their guns into the windshield, then sprint to a getaway car. The driver of the shot-up car manages to get out, and he's seen dragging another man, bleeding profusely. When all is said and done, 3 Bandidos members are wounded, and 1 is dead, the president of the Danish Bandidos, Ulf Larsen. But the Hells Angels aren't finished that day. 300 miles away, at the Oslo International Airport, another group of Bandidos, this time Norwegians, is arriving back home from the party in Helsinki. They too are ambushed by the Hells Angels, and another member is shot and wounded. Says a police commander, quote, "It was a very good professional job, like a military operation. The Hells Angels are not like the Bandidos, who are kamikaze pilots. The Hells Angels always try to measure out the pros and cons. The Bandidos have recruited the worst of the worst, the scum, but that made them extremely strong. So there was retaliation after retaliation." So the violence continues. The Bandidos hit back with rocket attacks, their weapons having been stolen from Swedish military depots. The Angels then break into a prison in Copenhagen and lob a grenade in the cell of a Bandidos VP before spraying it with machine gun fire. There's tit-for-tat attacks almost weekly, with 2 or 3 per week in an extremely violent July. Shootings, grenades, anti-tank rackets all across Scandinavia. Even the American leadership of both the Bandidos and the Hells Angels say that they've lost control of their Scandinavian counterparts. It'll come to be known as the Great Nordic Biker War. This is the Underworld Podcast. Welcome back to the greatest audio experience in the history of the spoken word, the Underworld Podcast, where every week we bring you new stories of international organized crime from the past, present, and future. I'm Danny Gold. I'm joined by Sean Williams. We trade off hosting duties every other week, and we are both journalists who have traveled all over the world reporting on this sort of stuff, and now we make this podcast because we make money off it.
Yeah, we do. I'm here. Hello. I do the show as well.
Yeah. Great intro. As always, bonus episodes are available for the low price of $5 a month. We've had, I think, 2 in the last week, which is a record. We're going to try to keep that up. You can sign up on Spotify right there in the page where you click on bonus things. iTunes, patreon.com/underworldpodcast. It goes right to your feed. It's worth it. Merch is available at underworldpod.com. T-shirts, stickers, mugs, even a hoodie. Get your fall fashions ready with a Don't Instagram Your Crimes sweatshirt. And for tips and other assorted whatever advertising inquiries, all that, the Underworld Podcast at gmail.com. Thanks as always for your support. Support our advertisers too. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you today.
Yeah, I gotta update the payment on the website, then otherwise we're not gonna have one. But
anyway, motorcycle gangs, crews, clubs, whatever you want to call them, of Scandinavia and Holland too, I guess, because they factor into it as well. We haven't really done a ton, I think, on outlaw bikers. It's honestly not something I'm super familiar with or I've really reported on before. But we did do the crazy Canadian Biker War. There was a two-parter on that. And Sean, you've done some like Aussie and New Zealand stuff, right? Because they're pretty active over there.
Yeah, they're kind of like the go-betweens from the big narcos to the streets. I went up north like what was it? It feels like it may have been in January to interview one of the old sort of former leaders of one of the traditional biker clubs here, which is Black Power. That's on the Patreon, so people can check that out. And I think, yeah, I did one of my first episodes on New Zealand as well, way, way back. It's cool. It's like changes from country to country, right? It's really, really different, the biker gang world.
Yeah, and what they're capable of and what they do. If you want someone who's actually really deep in the culture, there's a guy on Instagram and probably TikTok too, called Outlaw Archive. And he does some great stuff on like the histories, I think really focused on the US ones, Hells Angels specifically, Bandidos too. And it's fascinating the stuff to see that he pulls up and kind of educates people on. But yeah, the Great Northern Biker War, the Great Nordic Biker War, Scandinavian Biker War. One of the reasons this is such a big deal is because these countries, Norway, Finland, Denmark, and Sweden, in the 80s and 90s, they were pretty violent, crime-free countries. I mean, not crime-free, not completely violent crime-free, but they don't have the same level of organized crime you'd find in the rest of Europe. Super low murder rates and violent crimes. Of course, now, we've got Sweden having grenade tossing competitions in Malmo and all sorts of gang wars popping off, but that really wasn't the case back then. I do think besides the bikers, there was some Balkan organized crime groups that were starting to take hold in the 90s. And if I base my knowledge off of Copenhagen, off the Pusher trilogy, which I really do, things were starting to really come together then. But there was nothing like this biker war that popped off. The story actually starts in Amsterdam in the 1970s, but we should go back to the start of 1% outlaw motorcycle clubs just briefly. The Hells Angels are, of course, the biggest and most well-known motorcycle club. They're actually named after a B-17 bomber group in World War II. And after the war, motorcycle clubs / biker gangs, they're springing up all over, with a lot in California. Some people say it's mostly vets looking to get a rush, play by their own rules, rebel and all that. But I've also seen that disputed sometimes. Whatever the case, the first Hells Angels club is founded in 1948 in San Bernardino. And they spring up in the late 40s, and by the 60s, there's 500 of them. And they've gone international in England, Switzerland of all places, West Germany. I think the first full-patch Hells Angel club in Europe is started in Great Britain in 1969.
Yes, Britain mentioned. Nice, get it in early. So proud.
Yeah. Quick explainer, full patch means they're officially Hells Angels, but there's also, other levels which function as sort of like a probationary period, right? Not just for members, but for full clubs as well. You've got prospect clubs, support clubs. These clubs are trying to be fully made or incorporated as Hells Angels or Bandidos in this story. So they're down to really put in work, like the dirty work, and they want to impress the Hells Angels. There's a lot of those groups in this episode. I may just refer to them interchangeably as Hells Angels or Bandidos to make it easier to understand for everyone. My apologies to the outlaw biker community, but we run a tight ship here, and I can't confuse Sean. He is sometimes a little on the slow side.
That's true. Mentally, physically. I always really work super slow as well, and I'm unproductive, and I'm also really bad in bed. So,
I've heard one of 5 of those things is definitely not true, and I'll leave the audience to guess which one.
Who have you?
So the early 60s, the 60s, the early 70s, this is like the Hunter S. Thompson era. They're sort of what you imagine biker gangs to be, right? The rebels, long hair, beards, tattoos, partying for 5 days straight, like criminals, but not organized crime. They'd beat the crap out of you, maybe murder a guy or rivals, traffic something, but not like a mafia. But the end of the 60s also sort of signals a new beginning for the biker gangs, especially with the murder at Altamont. That was the Rolling Stone concert where the Hells Angels were providing security, and they stabbed to death a young concert goer, and the whole thing was caught on film. The concert had gotten ugly. There were fights in the crowd between the Hells Angels and everyone else, and this kid pulled a gun on them and was stabbed to death. And that was sort of like a turning point, I think, not only in that with the Hells Angels, but in like 60s counterculture as well. That's also the year Easy Rider came out. I think, yeah, that was 69. And Hunter S. Thompson's famous book on the Hells Angels comes out in 67. So there's a whole romantic lore developing around them and biker gangs in general. There's also this amazing clip on YouTube, if you look it up. It's a CBC talk show, I think, and a Hells Angel rides his bike on stage to confront Hunter S. Thompson and have like a joint interview with him.
Yeah, it sounds like corny when you say it like that, but it's it's not super sanitized, right? It's actually quite intense. It's
Yeah.
worth seeing.
Oh yeah, yeah. They were not messing around, and it wasn't like now where everything is like, I don't know, has the feeling of like schlocky or for clout or for I don't know, Instagram clips. It like it feels a lot more authentic then. But maybe that's just me looking back with rose tinted glasses on media.
But you're a super young guy in your what, late 20s?
It's funny.
You're
It's good.
part of the crowd.
It's good. We're the same age. I don't know why you're talking nonsense here. Just because I look a little more tired than you do. But
yeah, I'm about to come out to New York and celebrate my 25th birthday, and we're going to go crazy.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens there. Now, the 70s is really when some biker gangs transition into organized crime from being, of a disorganized hoodlums interested in drugs and partying kind of nature. And their interest starts lending itself towards being a criminal money-making organization. And that's where the European expansion comes in. At the same time this is happening, outlaw biker culture is taking off in Europe. They're starting to see all this stuff about motorcycle gangs, movies, the talk shows, and they're into it. It's like, American soft power, baby. So in Amsterdam in the 1970s, a Dutch delinquent by the name of Willem van Boxtel starts his own motorcycle gang called the Creedler Ploeg East. It's going to be nice for me to butcher, people's names on this, like white people names, equal opportunity here at the Underworld podcast.
Yeah, I mean, all Dutch names are just funny, right? I mean, there's like Jaap, Joost, Jelle, and their numbers are great. Just starts in German, ends in English. It's just mad language. Nice canals, though. I like them a lot.
Not the most pleasant sounding language. I'm not going to lie to you, but a nice country, I like windmills. You like windmills?
Who doesn't, man?
Yeah.
I love them. And we're actually going to talk about windmills in another show we're going to record soon as well, but not in Holland. Anyway, that's a very weird teaser to like the next show.
It's a lot more interesting than windmills, I swear. It's actually probably one of our... It's Burma, it's scam, compound, slave labor.
It's Dutch windmills in Burma.
Rebels.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Really weird.
It's an insane episode. By the way, a lot of this stuff, not what we were just saying, but a lot of stuff in this episode comes from the book Angels of Death, which it's by Julian Scher and William Marsden, who are great journalists who cover outlaw motorcycle clubs very thoroughly. They've got a couple books out on them. They're Canadian, I believe. There's also a good YouTube channel hosted by a Swedish guy called Magnus. It's called Magnus Explains History. Has a lot of biker videos. He's a good source. So Willem, he's from East Amsterdam. He's a rough and tumble guy. He wants to be like the Hells Angels, and he envisions himself like the next Sonny Barger, who was one of the founding members of the Oakland chapter and something like their celebrity spokesman. But he also, I think he celebrated a lot too. He had a good time. So these guys like Willem, they love this stuff, and they love the American biker movies that they're seeing, and they want to emulate them. It kind of reminds me of how we talked about this in our Jamaican Street Gangs episode. That was a two-parter about them in the 60s and 70s. They all fashioned themselves after Western cowboy movies that were filmed in Hollywood, to the point where they like name themselves after the cowboys. Like, I mean, I love gangster movies and shows and all that too, but like these things do influence people to get into the life. Like, it's definitely inaccurate to say they don't. So Willem, who starts going by Big Will, not the most original nickname, he recruits some like-minded Dutch youth, and they do things like beat up the manager of a convenience store, beat up teachers, beat up students. He actually gets 6 weeks in jail for one of the assaults. But when he gets out, him and his crew get into a rumble with a visiting English youth gang. The Amsterdam youth officials, they're so concerned that in 1974, they vote to give him and his gang $100,000 to build their own clubhouse, figuring if they had it, they'd leave people alone, they'd have their hobby and their place to hang out, which is like, I mean, that's the most European shit I've ever heard in my entire life, right? Spoiler alert, it backfires. Oh, they also approve an annual renewing grant of $12,000 for them to put on youth events and charity things.
Are there football teams involved in all of this as well? Because I like the Dutch and the English fans used to have some pretty frightening tear-ups around this time. And I guess a lot of the hooliganism must have been bound up in organized crime as well, right?
Did you come across it? I did not know that about Dutch hooligans. But yeah, I know that eventually the biker gangs start recruiting out of the like soccer hooligans sort of, they're taking any scumbag they can find. And,
yeah.
Like
there would have been a lot
are going to have some of that. And this is something, the clubhouse and the grants and the money, it's something you'll see in some of the Scandinavian countries too. Like the governments of these countries were literally giving these groups money out of their budget to build and rent their clubhouses, like and have events. Like seriously, That annual grant actually continues for more than another decade until they realize that the gang is actually all men in their 30s and they haven't done any charity events or stuff for at-risk youth besides recruit them.
Whoopsie. Yeah.
By 1977, this gang is a full-on prospect gang for the Hells Angels, who are starting to look into expansion, Amsterdam being a huge drug hub and prime target. International Hells Angels from other clubs in Europe, Canada, and Australia, and the US, they come through to check things out and make sure the club is up to speed. They have these big plans. They're also throwing parties, and in one situation, they gang sexually assault a 19-year-old Dutch girl, but the police don't actually do much. And Big Will tries to appease the community with a Toys for Tots type of stuff, which is something the Angels also do in the States. In 1978, the Dutch Hells Angels get full patch status and throw a rager for 3 days of straight partying. Will and his crew set up shop in Amsterdam's red light district. They've got the weed cafes, the nightclubs, they're pushing dope, and they're linking up with all the other criminal groups that are passing through. I think they're also heavily involved in the sex industry. As all this was going on, Big Will starts thinking his next move is going to be to go next door and expand to Scandinavia, which had a whole bunch of biker gangs but not one dominant presence. To do so, he links up with a Danish biker named Bent Svang Nielsen, aka Blondie, which is, they're not so good with the nicknames, the Dutch bikers.
There's plenty of Bent Svang in the red light district, am I right?
I mean, there's a young Sean Williams joke here, but I hadn't thought of it until you said that. So, Blondie already has 5 or so crews under him, said to be going on under the Galloping Goose MC moniker, which is weird because I think Galloping Goose was a big thing out of Cali already, but whatever. They soon patch over, and the first full patch Hells Angel club in Scandinavia, in Denmark, becomes a thing in 1980. And so they start doing as the Hells Angels do and taking over. But Denmark has some other biker clubs that aren't particularly fond of the Hells Angels and don't like them taking everything over. A bunch of them unite under the umbrella of what they called the Bullshit Motorcycle Club, or the BSMC. I think we got to go with BSMC to not get demonetized. They'd set up shop in Copenhagen's premier drug market in a neighborhood called Christiania, which is a fascinating place. Sean, have you been there?
Yeah, I went there very briefly for I took a wander around for a short time, and it felt like it was beyond its peak at the time, kind of like slightly hipster moved in. It's pretty cool. It's not on the level of like Burning Man is now, but it's a long way from the old squats in Berlin. I don't know. I wish I'd lived in a squat when I was younger. I think I had the personal hygiene and the politics for it back then.
Definitely had the personal hygiene for it in my 20s. I'm with you on that. But it's kind of like, for those who don't know, like this autonomous area that formed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, it formed when like hippies and punks took over abandoned military barracks and set up a squaw community, like right in the middle of Copenhagen. And the Danish...
It's right in the middle. Yeah.
The Danish and Copenhagen government basically like allowed the whole thing, and they allowed them to live outside the system, which meant you could sell and do drugs there. It's a cool area, supposedly. Lots of arts, cafes, all that, big tourist attractions, and a big drug market, which the BSMC controlled most of. I saw speculation that at one point, the market did somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 a day in business, mostly hash and weed.
Wow.
Which strikes me as impossibly high. It was $36 million a year, is what they say. Well, I guess if you do the math, but I guess that's like 2,008ths, right? Or whatever the price was back then, like around 2,000 sales, which doesn't strike me as that far-fetched if it's like a place where everyone in the city goes to get their weed or their hash, right? Like, I guess...
No, but this is... If you're trying to stop the... they can do drugs in Christiania, but why can't you just put cops on the edge of the streets? That's it.
Well, they have to search everyone coming out. But I guess, drug dealing is profitable. Like, thinking about it, like $100,000 a day does not strike... Wait, am I doing the math right? Yeah, 2,000, right? 2,000 times 50. Yeah, so it doesn't strike me as that like...
He's figuring out his next career move right now.
It doesn't strike me as that absurd. When I first heard it, I was like, that's crazy. But yeah, you can really make a lot of money doing that. I guess 100K in revenue, but who knows what the probably
he's about to walk out the studio.
Where were we anyway? So
you're doing a podcast.
Yeah, I'm doing a podcast. That's right.
You're free to go.
Not fantasizing about how career moves. So the Angels actually... all right, never mind. So the Angels, they want control of it, and the BSMC refuses to give it up. Then in September of 1983, violence breaks out. According to one source, 4 BSMC guys show up in a Hells Angels pub. The Hells Angels get tipped off by a bartender that the BSMC guys are there, and Blondie, the leader we talked about, he shows up and promptly stabs 2 of them to death and injures a third. He'll eventually get sentenced to 16 years, which I think is that's what's considered life in a lot of these these countries, is 16 years, at least in Denmark at the time. I believe he's paroled after 10, but he continues to lead the Hells Angels from prison. The BSMC still won't give up the territory, and this is the start of the first Danish Biker War, not the Great Nordic Biker War.
Yeah, a bit getting your Balkan War names right there. That's that's crazy that he gets out of the 10, just continues to lead the group. So their full argument for lenient sentences has just fallen through the floor there.
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of that.
Nothing.
A lot of that. And I mean, it seems like, I want to do a new update on the Sweden gang stuff, because I've talked to some other people, and there's been a really good book written, but it seems like, these countries have not really learned much about violent criminal gangs in the past 40 years, despite what happens now. But that's another story. And the BSMC, they're in way over their heads. First, though, they plan some attacks and they take some shots at the Hells Angels, like literal shots. They shoot up their clubhouse, but no one is killed. Then the Hells Angels go to work. A Hells Angel by the name of Jorgen Nielsen, not to be confused with Blondie Nielsen, catches the BSMC president, who goes by Mackerel, outside his home with his girlfriend. He shoots him in front of her, then runs up and dumps the full clip into him, killing him. He flees to Canada for a year or two, but he comes back and turns himself in. While on the run, he writes his autobiography and publishes it while in prison, and he becomes a sort of celebrity there. The book is called My Life, and it portrays him, he portrays himself as like a victim of Danish society, and he's soon the unofficial spokesman for the Angels there. He talks about how they're not criminals, they're just misunderstood outcasts. While in prison, he's even invited to schools and clubs to give talks about his life as an angel, like he gets furloughed to do that. Says a member of the Danish parliament years later, quote, "Back in the 80s, the bikers were looked upon as some folkloristic, exotic element. A lot of youngsters were hanging out on street corners, and the clubs were seen as performing a useful social function, something that would stop them from becoming criminal."
I mean, beside the fact that that guy's just written a book about them not being criminals, despite him being a literal criminal, like, how did they possibly think these clubs were anything other than criminal, like, gangs, if they were openly modeling themselves on international drug smuggling operations?
I think the Scandinavians are just, they're a tolerant people.
Dummies?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that too. The point is, though, that, like, the Danes were very soft on these guys, like, very soft. We jumped ahead of ourselves, but the war continues. The replacement president of the BSMC is killed in a Christiana pub in 1985, as is a local civilian. Before the war is over, a third president will also be killed. By 1988, 8 members of the BSMC are dead, as are 3 innocents and 1 Hells Angel. The BMC at this point, they just surrender. They call the Hells Angels, they tell them they're burning their vest and knocking down their clubhouse. So the Hells Angels are now firmly in control of Denmark and Holland, and no one can touch them for now. In 1988, the Dutch police find documents in a Hells Angels clubhouse of a plan to expand all over Europe. They divide it into 3 blocks. First, it's Scandinavia, the Baltics, and Russia, then Great Britain, and then Western Europe. The Angels feel untouchable. In 1990, the police raid and arrest every member of a Hells Angels supporters club. Then the prosecutor and a detective get grenades thrown at their houses. But enter the Bandidos, another old-school American 1% outlaw motorcycle club from the States. They got their start in Texas in the 1960s, and I believe are now the 3rd biggest outlaw motorcycle club in the world after the Hells Angels and the Outlaws. They might actually be number 2. They fought plenty of wars with the Hells Angels all over the world.
Yeah, just a shout out to New Zealand, where in typical style, it took them until 2012 to set up here and got immediately smashed by the cops, I think. So go Kiwis, as usual, doing it late and doing it bad.
At the time, they're considered like the Hells Angels' main enemies in the States, and they too start expanding like crazy, first in Australia and then with their eyes on Europe. They move into Marseille, France in 1989, which the Angels immediately try to put a stop to, killing the VP of the club the Bandidos patched over. Then there's a major recruitment rush for both motorcycle clubs across Europe. There's tons of these small motorcycle gangs there, as well as other gangs eager to be affiliated with the two. Blondie Nielsen, still in prison, but overseeing things for the Hells Angels Scandinavia, wants to now expand to Sweden and has the idea to have 3 biker gangs in Malmo vying to become Hells Angels fight each other, with the last one standing becoming a support club, which ends up being called, the club is called the Draggles, or it's Swedish for scum. They're anointed in 1990 and become full patch in 1993, led by a psychotic neo-Nazi named Thomas Muller. What's it with the O with the little dots on top? Come on, you're European.
Müller.
Mueller?
Yeah.
All right, Mueller. There we go. But around the same time, things are happening with Bandidos in Sweden and Denmark. First in Copenhagen, there's a Hells Angels support club called the Morticians that has a falling out with them, then morphs into another club called the Undertakers. The Undertakers also take in some former members of the bullshit motorcycle club that had formerly warred with the Angels and that we just talked about. In 1992, they reach out to the Bandidos members in the US and France, hoping to patch in and get protection from them. The Bandidos patch them over at the end of 1993. Things are starting to look like there might be a biker war coming. But the biker leadership in the US on both sides don't want this. They have a meeting in Paris to work out a peace treaty or a truce or non-aggression pact of sorts. Sonny Barger, then the leader of the Angels, even calls Thomas Mueller, the leader in Sweden I just mentioned, to the States to lay down the law. He also meets with Bandidos' US leaders in Texas. They really want to avoid this. You know, they're making money at this point, and wars have the opposite effect when you're in a criminal organization. So things are starting to get heavy, but they come to this compromise where the Bandidos are required to let the Angels know where they're expanding, and the Hells Angels get a vote. But again, this is a deal made by leadership, American leadership. The European bikers are less inclined to abide by it. But you've got these outsiders making peace without really taking into account what these guys think. So the Hells Angels, they say fine, that Bandidos can have these two clubs in Denmark, but that's it. No more expanding into Scandinavia. Sweden is officially Hells Angels only territory. But the Bandidos Europe are already making moves like they're not going to listen. To the point where US leadership is saying, the US Bandidos leadership is saying they can't control them. The Bandidos there are led by a guy named Jim Tindon. Jim takes in some Angels that have been kicked out, as well as some former surviving members of the Bullshit Club, and you can kind of see this bad blood building.
Yeah, it's getting pretty chopped up. I feel like also surviving members of the Bullshit Club would be a pretty good name for us, and also a good T-shirt.
It's actually not. It's not bad, actually. It's not a bad, a bad way to describe us. So, there is this phenomenon though in biker gangs in Europe, which I think is different from the States, but I'm not sure, where a guy in one gang will get kicked out or part ways and then join the rival, and it happens a lot. Like, really, it seems like half these clubs are made up of guys who were once in the other club, the rival. One of the guys who does this is like a real brolic enforcer by the name of Jan Clark Nielsen. They're all named, or Nelson, who helped start the Great Nordic Biker War, according to History with Magnus. He had joined a Hells Angels support club in Denmark in 1984. He helps kill one of the presidents of the BMC during that first war, and he's a really physically imposing guy. He does like debt collection, security. He enforces discipline with other members. In 1991, he co-founds another Hells Angel prospect club called the Morbids. He's violent, he's always looking for a war, and he wants the Hells Angels to go to war with the Undertakers, as they're looking to join the Bandidos. The Undertakers, prior to joining the Bandidos, they were actually looking to make peace efforts, and Clark was totally against the Angels making peace with them. He's always sabotaging the truce talks, which is a big reason that the Undertakers end up joining the Bandidos. Around the same time, the Hells Angels tell Clark that his crew, Morbids MC, can patch over only if they unite with another prospect club that Clark happens to hate. He's pissed off and he refuses. And now he has this beef with the Angels. So he takes Morbids MC and he becomes a prospect club for the Bandidos in Sweden before Jim Tindon, the leader, patches them over to become full Bandidos members in 1994, violating the non-aggression pact.
Wow, that's a hell of a lot of chopping and changing between the two groups. The three groups, is it? Yeah. I feel like the high mark of these biker clubs exactly at the same time that Scandinavia's football teams are killing it as well. Like Denmark 92, Sweden 94. There's got to be some crossover there. It might be the subject of I don't know, if anyone wants a 10,000 word Harper story, maybe that could be the next subject.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea. I do remember playing with Sweden though in like FIFA, what was it, FIFA 96? FIFA 95?
Yeah.
They had that guy, Larson, what was his name? That sick...
Yeah, Henrik Larson, man.
Yeah, dude, guy was
a legend.
Yeah. Was that FIFA 96 or 98? I don't remember, dude. But
he went on forever, man.
I
think he retired like 40.
Anyway, where was I? Yeah, a lot of names. Is this making sense? Are the names, are they confusing you? Different clubs, all that stuff?
I think we're getting through it. I think you're doing a good job.
Okay.
Yeah, because it is pretty frustrating. It is pretty like confusing, and to add to that, it's like Scandinavian names that everyone's called like Anders Nielsen.
Yeah, they're all named Nielsen. But I think the gist is getting through, hopefully, to our listeners. So a couple of shootings happen but no one's really injured after the Angels send a support club to shoot up a Bandidos clubhouse. But it's starting to look like the war is just completely on. Now, there's some different theories as to why the war really kicks off. One is that it's over control of drug routes and trafficking in these territories, hash and weed coming from Morocco, heroin from Afghanistan, and Amsterdam, which at the time is a huge ecstasy manufacturing hub. I should add, too, that Hells Angels have already at this point expanded to Finland and Norway. So there's territory that they're fighting over. But there's also a pride and honor motorcycle club thing. And this theory says that the Bandidos had humiliated some Hells Angels that they find in a restaurant, and this kicks things off. When during this incident, the Hells Angels are forced to hide. I think one or two guys are forced to hide in a woman's bathroom. Reports the LA Times, quote, ostensibly, the deadly duel is about biker supremacy and was set off, according to one version, by an insulting barroom brawl in Denmark across the Øresund Strait. Øresund Strait? Sean, is that right?
Øresund.
Yeah. As the story goes, a desperate Hells Angel locked himself in the woman's restroom to escape a carousing gang of bandidos. That humbling episode, or perhaps one of many like it, since no one can say for certain, grew into a deadly tit-for-tat over biker honor and shame. But a Swedish detective tells them otherwise, quote, this isn't about motorcycles. It is about power, territory, and the criminal market, the Stockholm detective said. They usually travel by car or limousine, and 60% of them don't even have driver's licenses for motorcycles. Many of them were criminals before they joined these clubs, and they remain criminals, which actually sounds similar to the Canadian biker wars, where they, kind of wear suits and operate much more like a mafia than a roving band of methed up leather vest-clad, long-haired roughnecks.
I guess it's probably both, right? Like these clubs are definitely there to make big money, and plenty are in it to be kingpins, but also a lot of the grunts are just guys who like wearing the outfits and having drunk fights, right? It's a bit like our listenership.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably is accurate for Scandinavia, but when we did the Canadian stuff, it really seemed like they were more of a, mafia-style criminal organization where riding a motorcycle didn't really factor in too much by the time the sort of late 80s and 90s hit. Whatever the case, in February of 1994, 15 Danish bandidos are throwing a party at a rooftop bar. The Hells Angels decide to crash it, shots are fired, one biker is killed, and a bunch more are injured. Around this time, the Bandidos have an idea that's going to take things to the next level and garner headlines all over the world. Sweden and Denmark, during the 80s and 90s, they have mandatory military service for young men, and they also have these state-sponsored militias, not like Mad Max Libyan war style stuff, like citizens around the country who were on call of some sorts. And I assume it was like a Cold War thing, right? That makes the most sense, like in case the Soviet Union invades. Yeah. But for these militias, they had armories or weapons depots all over the country, and they were basically unguarded. They had small weapons, but also grenades, anti-tank rockets, RPGs, and again, unguarded with like a padlock on them, which is just good stuff. So on February 20th, 1994, the Bandidos raid a Swedish weapons depot and steal shoulder-fired light anti-tank weapons, also grenades, guns, ammo. And the book by Sharon Marsden quotes a Swedish intel police official who says, it was probably dozens of times that they broke into various depots. Only the Defense Department really knows.
Yeah, that's a clown show, man. That's nuts.
Yeah. Also landmines, automatic rifles, explosives. When all is said and done, 36 weapons depots will have been looted before the governments get a hold of them, mostly by the Bandidos. The Hells Angels start getting Soviet and Yugoslavian weapons, including rocket launchers from Eastern Bloc countries, which I think is now where the very different gangs in Malmo still get some of their weapons. Again, the U.S. counterparts are trying to calm things down. They have meetings with their leaderships, but Moeller for the Angels isn't listening, and neither is Jim and the Bandidos, Jim Tindon. The attacks kick off, a lot of them near Malmo, where the two Swedish clubs are. Shootings every week, which is crazy for Sweden at the time. Not now, but at the time. Like, this is Europe. This is Northern Europe. This isn't supposed to happen. Technically, there's only one full Hells Angels chapter in Sweden and one Bandidos, but there's 15 or so other motorcycle crews looking to get involved and earn their stripes, mostly on the side of the Angels. And it's a couple thousand bikers when you add them all up, and they're ready for war. The Bandidos come in blazing, just shooting away, no real strategy, just trying to put fear and bullets in the hearts of the Hells Angels bikers. But the Hells Angels are different. They're tactical. They're strategic. On July 17th, 1995, the Swedish Bandido president is out for a long ride on his Harley on a deserted stretch of a road after coming back from a meeting in Helsinki, Finland. The Angels had set up an ambush with a rifle, and he shot 5 times and killed. The same day,
2 more banditos are killed in Helsinki in Finland. Writes Sharon Marsden, quote, as the war spread through Scandinavia, machine gun battles broke out in Oslo and Copenhagen. Both sides lived in constant fear of attack from car bombs, drive-by shootings, and rocket attacks. It wasn't unusual for a biker to find a hand grenade strapped to his ignition. A week later, the banditos launched rockets at the Hells Angels clubhouse in Finland, but no one is hurt. 1996, though, that's when things really kick off. Every few weeks, someone is being gunned down and bombs are being tossed across Scandinavia. And then we have cold open with the twin airport attacks, the subsequent grenade attacks in the prison, and all hell just breaking loose. Here's a rundown of attacks from just July of 1996. July 3rd, bomb found in Bandidos linked home in Denmark. July 10th, bomb planted in Bandidos car in Denmark. July 15th, Danish banditos shot and killed near Oslo. July 19th, shot fired at a Hells Angels sympathizer in downtown Oslo. July 21st, bomb found outside Hells Angels Copenhagen clubhouse. July 23rd, Bandidos member shot and wounded in Sweden. July 25th, Hells Angels shot and wounded in prison cell in Denmark.
Was this making big news back then? This is insane. It's like it is a full war.
Yeah. I mean, this was making international headlines, you know, like the AP was getting reports in the LA Times and all that with just kind of the worst headlines you've seen newspapers having, like a lot of making the same something is rotten in Denmark sort of pun in that, well, I guess not pun, but joke in the headline like 40 times. Stuff about biker wars revving up, Vikings references and things like that. So it was making news for sure.
Yeah.
And grenade and gun attacks in jails is wild, even by like American standards. I don't even know if that was happening in like Latin America at the time. You know, like in Mexico, where the cartels doing this stuff. Like now in Brazil, you know, they have 40 people get killed. But was it happening in the early 90s? I don't remember. I don't know if specifically it was. So it happening in like Northern Europe, where they're supposed to be, you know, the most civilized among us, as they would like to think of themselves. Why am I being so hateful towards Northern? No, they're great. But yeah, it was shocking. This is a paragraph from the Tampa Bay Times, though, speaking of international coverage, about a Danish cop, quote, in Copenhagen's police headquarters, Per Larsen, detective commander, makes little attempt to disguise his glee at the damage the gangs are doing to one another. The groups are fighting one another, and no innocent bystander has yet been hurt, he says. If two groups really want to kill each other, the police in a modern democracy can do little to prevent it happening. Which, the takeaway from that is great. Like, I really think there is something you can do to stop it, you know? Like, I think even in a democracy, you can
possibly.
You can shut things down. But
what?
Let's backtrack for a second. So we have that cold open. The Angels ambush banditos at 2 international airports, Copenhagen and Oslo. They also kill the leader of the Danish banditos. Then there's the rocket attacks at the Hells Angels clubhouses, 2 4 hours apart. The first one causing no injuries, but burns down an annex, and the second one fails to detonate. Then the Angels break into a prison in Copenhagen and lob a grenade in the cell of a banditos VP, before spraying it with machine gun fire, which is insane. One report says he only survives because he has a wooden leg. Another report says he actually loses his leg in that attack, but that might have even been a separate attack. Either way, after that, the Hells Angels, they send a mail bomb to another bandito that's in prison too, and then stroll into a minimum security facility and throw a grenade through a jail cell window, critically wounding another bandito member. Here's the Independent summarizing some of the goings-on. Quote, Morten Traben, a Bandidos leader, lost a leg this week after the enemy Hells Angels lobbed a grenade into his cell at an open prison. The brothers hit back fast, opening fire on a Hells Angel, Paulden Jacobsen, at his girlfriend's home in Copenhagen. Quote, what would you do if someone chopped your brother? Asked Jim, the Bandido spokesman, giving an interview by mobile phone. We have our honor and our pride. We are one big family. What I wouldn't do, I think, is confess my crimes to reporters while on the phone.
No, definitely do that. Just do it with one of us.
Yeah, call me and Sean. Let us know. A couple of months later, in October 1996, the Hells Angels are throwing a Viking fest at their clubhouse in Copenhagen. The clubhouses by that point are like fortified, super secure, ready for anything. There's 300 people there. Bandito climbs some buildings nearby, and at 3 a.m., he fires a rocket launcher right into the clubhouse. There's a monster explosion. 2 people are killed, 18 injured. 1 biker is heard fleeing from the burning clubhouse screaming, "The idiots got us." There's a second rocket found later. It could have been much worse, but the guy decided to flee instead of firing it. He ends up getting life in 1998, but again, 16 years. One of the killed is a civilian. a 29-year-old woman who was allegedly at the party because the Hells Angels had invited their neighbors to improve their image, which, I don't know. Either way, a civilian dying, it really changes things. Rocket attacks killing a young woman in the middle of Copenhagen are gonna have that effect. The Danish lawmakers move quick. They pass a law kicking all bikers out of their clubhouses and raid them. Angry civilians even take sledgehammers to one of them. Here's a local reporter summarizing it, quote, "The first step was to bar bikers from having clubhouses in populated areas because they represented a threat to their neighbors. All 15 clubhouses have since been closed, and the gangs no longer have any gathering place. They have removed their usual regalia and gone underground." Regalia?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, of all the pronunciations in this
That's
show.
the one I'm worried about. A member of the Danish parliament also notes that some clubhouses have been established with rent subsidies from municipalities and had benefited from other grants that we talked about. And then, in amazing Scandinavian fashion, some of the neighbors think the whole thing is just unfair. This is from the Washington Post, quote, "The bikers are gone from that street, taking with them the local threat. But there is no sense of triumph among the neighbors. They are suspicious of the recent talk from Danish Justice Department officials that the bikers, called rockers here after the 60s British term mods and rockers, might be specifically forbidden to congregate. I don't like this special kind of law," said dry cleaner Henry Pearson, who lives across the street from the now raised clubhouse. "Who knows? It might work against other groups. Like Jehovah's Witnesses, religious groups," he says. "That's not freedom." Kirsten Monberg, another neighbor, said she was frantic when one of the angels asked her 7-year-old son to go get him a pack of cigarettes. "It is legal for a 7-year-old to buy cigarettes here. I was scared," she said, but she quickly added, "The rockers have to be somewhere. They are human beings in our country. They have rights." The bikers concur.
Oh, wow.
If the government now completely prohibits the Bandidos, then they're declaring total bankruptcy and we're no longer living in a civilized society with rights, Bandidos leader Jim Tindon told the tabloid newspaper.
Oh, wait, was that your phrase? The bikers concur? Because I think that's like the most Scorsese phrase.
No, it's from the article.
Oh God, sorry. I thought that was you. That's such a cool little phrase. Bikers.
But I mean, it's they're saying that they need to be a civilized society. And the Bandidos are the one who just launched a rocket at a party full of people. I don't know, man.
Don't be a NIMBY.
Yeah. But yeah, you can kind of see like the genesis of why Sweden has this inability, or Scandinavia in general, the inability to confront the gangs that are there now, right? And Sweden especially. Like it's not new. Like this was going on in the 80s and 90s. Others, though, have their own idea on how to solve things. Writes Washington Post, quote, "Author Jørgen Knudsen wrote an open letter to the rockers to propose a solution out of Viking tradition. Holmgang, a definitive mano a mano on an island. Warring parties would agree on the time, place, weapons, and rules of the duel. The war would be over and even the defeated would still have their honor." That was before anti-tank missiles, which I actually think that actually rules. That would be a great idea for gang wars to be solved, you know? The bikers, though,
oh man,
they do not take him up on it. The war rages on, lots of shootings and bombings, a few murders, way more attempted murder. In May of 1997, a number of grenades are lobbed at the homes of some Hells Angels. The police are now, though, definitely taking it seriously. In March of 1997, the New York Times details how the night of a Hells Angels clubhouse party to celebrate the opening of their third chapter in Sweden in 5 years, 300 cops post up outside. And word spreads internationally about them more. So much so that Rock Machine, which is a notorious Canadian club that had been embroiled with the war with the Hells Angels in the 90s, that is insanely violent, way more so than this.
Yeah,
we did a 2-part episode on it. Sends some of their people to Sweden to try to make an alliance with the Bandidos and patch over because they want to like get their protection in Canada. But they're deported just as soon as they touch down. In that summer 1997, though, time is kind of running out in the biker war, as everyone, even the bikers, are sick of it. In June of 1997, we get the final straw, and it's actually in Norway. The president of the Oslo Hells Angels, who went by The Rat, has an idea. He rallies a support club to organize a car bomb, a minivan packed with dozens of kilos of explosives. The target is a former president of the Hells Angels Copenhagen, who had been kicked out and since joined the Bandidos. On the night of June 4th, one member wearing a wig and disguised as a woman drives the van over to the Bandidos clubhouse, parks it, and then lights a fuse, and then bicycles away with a bicycle he brought. The explosion rocks the neighborhood, damages a bunch of nearby buildings, 3 Bandidos are injured, and it kills an innocent woman driving by, I think she was in her 50s, and badly injures her husband. Reporters nearby, he happens to get the scene. He starts reporting live, and the whole country, including the king, is allegedly listening in as a propane tank explodes again, and sort of like the whole kind of country holds its breath when this happens. They're all shocked, so much so that the Prime Minister of Norway visits the scene the next day. All the leadership of the Scandinavian countries set up a meeting to discuss the biker war. The bikers themselves are afraid at this point. All of their businesses are destroyed. They're losing money. The public hates them. Everyone is tired of the violence. The American leadership of both gangs are also having meetings in the States trying to figure something out.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the questions I want to ask you. Like researching this, how closely involved are the OGs in the US then with these European franchises? Are they hands-on? Are they kind of like the bosses, or are they just letting things go?
It's tough to surmise because I assume, and from everything I've read, they are hands-on. They do dictate things, but it seems like there is some autonomy. They didn't want this war, and it seems to be happening. Maybe they didn't care that much about there not being a war, and like they were like, you got to do what you got to do. But it seems like there is some independence, and that guy Big Jim ends up being like, I think, one of the three most powerful in the Bandidos over the course of the next decade or two. So yeah, I think there is some top-down stuff, but there is also some autonomy. But I also could be wrong. I'm sure someone will get mad and inform me in the YouTube comments about the case. The Scandinavian governments actually have to petition the U.S. to let leaders from the clubs come to the U.S. to negotiate a peace deal. Finally, both Nordic gangs meet, with the police even providing security for the meetings. I think the danger the Swedes also hire a lawyer to help negotiate the treaty. On September 25th, 1997, our old pal Blondie Nielsen, the president of Hells Angels Denmark, and Jim Tindon, the European president of the Bandidos, shake hands on live TV. In their full uniforms with the leathers and everything, they then give a press conference on the end of the Great Nordic Biker War, which lasted 3 years, 11 dead, 400 violent incidents, 74 known murder attempts, and some disappearances. In total, 138 people are sentenced for the violence of 1996 and 1997 to a total of 240 years, which again, that would be the total sentence for one person in America for a double murder, we need a middle ground. We need a middle ground, folks. There should be a middle ground somewhere. But yeah, the violence does actually stop between these two gangs. The peace treaty holds for the most part. The authorities are thrilled, but they shouldn't be, because what actually happens is the bikers carve up Scandinavia and Europe so they can get to work making money through drugs, extortion, robbery, prostitution, whatever else. They get so detailed in carving up the territory. We're talking certain bars and cafes in cities. And they start expanding rapidly without the fear from violent confrontation, at least from their opposing gang. The Angels had chapters in Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland. The Bandidos expand as well. They soon have 171 members in Denmark and 13 clubs, 4 in Sweden, 2 in Finland, 2 in Norway. This also doesn't include support clubs, probationary clubs, and all that. The book I'm using as a source was written in 2006, and it claims that from 1998 till then, the number of bikers in Europe doubled. And, sure, the Scandinavian governments have cracked down here and there, but the bikers, as of today, are still super powerful. Of course, they're also competing now with what the press in those countries deem or call immigrant gangs, which is the stuff we hear about in Sweden, the ones that are ratcheting up the violence there to levels not even seen during the biker wars. And I think we've done an episode on the Macro Mafia, right?
Yeah.
Gangs like that.
Yeah.
You've also got the Albanians. They're definitely carving out their drug dealing empires as well. There's always incidents, though. In March of 2001, a former Bandidos president is shot 26 times and killed in Copenhagen. He had been thrown out of the Bandidos and started a Hells Angels support club. 2008, the Hells Angels fight a multi-year war with street gangs in Denmark over the drug market. The Bandidos have their own fights with street gangs as they start growing. In 2009, somebody tries to kill Blondie Nielsen. The treaty is actually called off in 2011, and there hasn't been a major war since then. In September 2012, the Copenhagen Post reports, quote, over 100 members of biker gangs were arrested by police in a coordinated effort against 18 gang strangleholds across Zealand yesterday. Police confiscated guns, knives, axes, drugs, and anabolic steroids in the raids, which were an attempt to assert control ahead of a gang war they suspect is brewing.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, Zealand is a big island in Denmark, which New Zealand is named after. So just in case there's any confusion there.
I actually didn't know that when I was doing this episode. I was confused there for a second.
Yeah.
So you learn something new every day, man. We really are one of the greatest educational podcasts in the entire world.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's true. Yeah, it is true.
Big Jim Tindon also grows the hell of the Bandidos. He increases their numbers to 1,600 and becomes the third most powerful member of the club after the US and Australian president. In April 2024, the Danish government initiates legal proceedings to dissolve the Danish Bandidos, formally citing their especially brutal behavior. Quote the AP, the head of the Danish police's National Special Crime Unit told broadcaster DR that the Bandidos are the largest and most violent gang in Denmark, and that the group has been expanding very significantly in recent years. So,
Wow.
I don't think they're getting government grants anymore. I don't think they're seen as pleasant, like, folk like Vikings, but they're definitely still there, and law enforcement seems to be trying to still get a hold on them. But I think they're taking it way more seriously than they did in the early 90s.
Yeah. Wow. What a story. That's not an optimistic note to end it on, but we don't do that, so that's fine.
I mean, they're just the game. Like, this isn't the end of the world type stuff here, but anyway,
we could just end every single episode.
That's the gang. It's not the end of the world here. Patreon.com/World Podcast, Spotify, iTunes. Definitely sign up for those bonuses, guys. They are well worth it. We let our hair down. We say stuff on those stash houses that we don't allow ourselves, believe it or not, to say here. A lot of Sean views, I think you guys would find extremely interesting and extremely offensive.
Yeah, they're very controversial.
Yeah, very controversial. And if you want to hear them, you got to join the Patreon and hear those bonus episodes where he's got a lot of theories, let's just say.
They're
Anyway.
all connected, though. At the end of the day, they're all connected. Whatever, yeah. People can tune in.
Anyway, take care, guys. Thanks for listening.